And what's your pleasure?
From the Thomaston Place Auction Galleries in Thomaston, Maine, I'm Elizabeth McLeod with Auction Waves.
1,175 once, 100,175 twice. We all good? Sold.
Adventure awaits in the great outdoors. But don't head into the woods unless you're prepared. Part of preparation is carrying the right equipment. And on this edition of Auction Waves, we'll talk with Thomaston Place Auction Gallery's outdoors specialist, Zeb Casperson, about some of the unique collectible and functional knives coming up in our North American collection auction. But first, the latest auction news. With May 15th fast approaching, preparations are complete for in-person previews beginning Monday, May 11th for our North American collection auction. And one item you really need to see up close for the full effect is a dramatic bronze sculpture by Western artist Bill Nebeker that captures the rugged spirit of the great American cowboy. Standing an impressive 32 inches high on a molded mahogany base, the piece is entitled Wet Leather, Cold Morning, and captures a moment in the daily life of a robust, ready-for-anything ranch hand in full working rangeman's gear, hefting his saddle on his hip and clutching his lariat as he steps out into a rain-swept morning to take on whatever two-fisted tasks the day might have in store. The figure is signed by the artist, numbered 14 out of a limited edition of 25, and is waiting to meet you as lot 1325. Whether your interests lie in the Old West, the frozen North, or in the sunshine of Arizona, you'll find something to catch your notice in our North American collection auction. See it all in our in-person previews, Monday, May 11th through Thursday, May 14th at our gallery, 51 Atlantic Highway in Thomaston, Maine. And if you can't bid in person, register now as a telephone or absentee bidder to enjoy a 5% savings on your buyer's premium on all auction wins. Get all the details and look over our full catalog at thomastonauction.com. This is Auction Waves, and I'm Elizabeth McLeod. If you love the majesty of the great outdoors, we have a lot you'll want to consider as you plan your bids for our North American collection auction, including an impressive collection of specialty knives. And just down from his woodland retreat to talk artisanal cutlery, we welcome back to the program our outdoor specialist, Zeb Casperson. And Zeb, before we step out and breathe some of that clean forest air and look over the offerings, I'd like to start off by asking what you think someone should look for in a fine outdoor knife.
It's a lot of different things. The biggest issue is going to be the form of the knife, the actual design of the blade, and the composition of the metal it's in. It needs to be strong without being too brittle, have some flexibility without being too soft. These are all things that make a resilient knife. It's hard to say because I think it's interesting in that knives can fill a wide role. I mean, there are specialty knives, there are knives that are particularly good at a certain task. You'll find that a lot of people in practical usage usually use knives for things they may not have necessarily been designed to do.
Is there ever a single knife, though, that can do many types of jobs well, or should you always carry several specialty knives?
So generally, I'd say out in the field, it's best to just have the least weight amount possible. So, while it may not be the master of any specific task, a good single blade, 3-inch blade knife is going to fill a lot of different roles that as long as you know how to use it.
Now we have a lot in this sale, lot number 1342. It has a pretty good assortment of different types of knives.
We actually have one here with this nice sort of rough horn handle. It hasn't really been finished much. It still has a lot of the bumpy texture to it. This is actually one that we'll talk a little bit more about him later, but one of the knives made by Chuck Bowen of Alaska. And this one is specifically designed for scraping. I mean, you still have a good handle that you would hold traditionally like a knife, but it comes out sort of in, to describe it to you, like the semi-crescent shape coming off the knife with the edge, the actual cutting edge being far away from your hand. And this is where you just have a good leverage and a good surface area to just peel away material and, not necessarily even scraping gunk off of other things or scraping bark. With this other one here with this nice attractive leather case of the buck knife. I mean, this is one that's a very traditional, I'd say, just sort of all around general purpose camping hunting knife. There's nothing here that is specially designed for a specific task, but you can accomplish a whole lot with it.
I remember when I was in grade school, we had a Maine guide visit to talk to the class, and he handed out a little booklet called "You Alone in the Maine Woods," a fluorescent orange booklet. And I remember that booklet vividly because it said that one of the most important things that you can carry with you whenever you go into the serious woods is a good general purpose knife. And I look at these buck knives, and I'm seeing a knife that you could do a lot with if you found yourself alone in the Maine woods. You could cut trees to form a shelter. I mean, there are a lot of things you could do with that knife.
No, and I mean, I think that's the thing is that, even with no tool, you could feasibly survive in the wilderness. I mean, it would be difficult and it would take some skill. But I think that's the thing is, like, if you're going to, and like he said, if you're going to have absolutely one single tool, for that scenario, a knife is definitely the only thing I can think of.
Now, I noticed that when I was helping to catalog some of these items, some of the knives that we have in this sale were made from antique circular saw blades. And that comes back to what you mentioned about specific types of metal having specific types of quality attached to them. What is it about an old saw blade that would make a desirable knife?
Well, so a lot of that is just going to be the steel that came down to use it. And typically you're going to see them marked as like high carbon or high tensile strength steel. And all that is just the carbon content of the steel. And it goes back to what I was talking about of a knife, it needs to be rigid and strong enough to maintain a cutting edge while still maintaining some sort of flexibility so that it doesn't just be brittle and snap under duress. And it's a very sort of fine middle point you have to find. But the other thing that just going back to talking about, some of these that are repurposed from other tools, I mean, that's the nice thing about metal is that, it can be sort of almost infinitely recycled. Especially in the case of a lot of the ulu knives we have, the traditional Inuit. But a lot of those were actually made, once they had contact with the whalers, with Westerners, and they were introduced to steel, they started taking like saw blades, any metal they could, and cutting out the form of those ulu blades that they used, for that purpose. Because, I mean, prior to that, most traditional knives, ulu knives were made either from pieces of slate or carved ivory or bone.
So let's talk a bit about ulu knives, because again, when I was doing research on these, it was a topic that I thought was really, really interesting and I hadn't really known a lot about. But I think that an ulu knife is one of the most practical types of knives that you can find. And we have a group of 4 of them in lot 1015, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about those.
What was interesting in looking at these knives is that very commonly they're translated, and I don't think it's an accurate translation, as women's knives is right. Usually the term for it.
I've heard of them being used as kitchen implements.
And they do fill that role, but I think kind of the misunderstanding there is more along the lines of these knives fulfill a really wide range of utility. It's not just a scraping or a cutting tool. I mean, these are ones that are used for, processing animals. They're used for cutting the snow for their igloos. They form a large part of their lives all around. And so it's interesting, too, in that not only do you have a lot of these, these knives obviously serve a utilitarian purpose, they've also become very symbolic of the culture of their way of life because it's something that comes into almost every part of what they do to survive in that environment. So, we have some of these knives that I think are very practical, like this one out of 1015, which, has a little hole cut in it so you could hang it from a lanyard or hang it on your wall. But really, this is just a robust, simple tool. It wasn't made with any embellishment on it.
I'm holding this myself now, and it fits so ergonomically into your hand. And I can think of a dozen things that I could do around the house with this knife. I could chop vegetables with this knife. This would be a beautiful vegetable chopper. Rock on the table. You could use it to cut pie crust. That's just a beautiful utilitarian tool that could fit into any lifestyle that you wanted it to.
And I've even seen remarks too that like even for other tasks like cutting meat or even, and I've heard of these being used to cut through bone. is that actually the placement of the handle relative to the blade, you get a lot of leverage. You get this sort of central pinpoint to where you can cut meat single-handedly without the use of a fork or something else like with a traditional steak knife. As they're able to be disseminated pretty widely, I think people see the utility over what we have traditionally believed a knife has to be, designed as.
Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the Alaskan tradition of our artisanal knives. We have a number of pieces by Chuck Bowen. You mentioned him earlier. He was known as the Knifeman of Alaska. And looking over some of the work that he did, it was just beautifully made. You have a very impressive pair of knives there as lot 1289, and 3 knives actually. Tell me about them, because they're beautiful to look at, and I imagine that they would be very pleasing to use.
The knife group I have here by Chuck runs a little bit of gamut. I'd call this like sort of a hunting assortment. So you have these 2 long bladed sort of what might be referred to as fillet knives. So I mean, certainly good for cutting fish, but also good for, like I was talking earlier, making those initial incisions for skinning an animal. But what I like about Chuck's work is that these have a very authentic feel to them. I mean, and I think some people will look at him and say, I mean, there is an element of these that are a tourist attraction. This is a souvenir to bring back from Alaska. But, I mean, he's really made this in a sense that it feels like a man who's using what's available to him, in the landscape around him. I mean, even the blades themselves, like one of these fillets I pull out looks very similar to what we were just talking about with how the Inuit were repurposing the metal around them that they were being given by these traders. And I mean, similarly here, it really looks like he's just taken a piece of high carbon steel off of a, old wood saw or something like that and fashioned it into a really just elegant little fillet knife here with a nice simple handle.
And the balance on that is just tremendous. I mean, it just looks like an artisanal tool. It doesn't look like something that was, just thrown into your knife drawer.
Right. No, I mean, these have a story around them, and it's fun, because I wasn't really aware of Chuck Bowen before we got these knives, and looking into him, it's interesting in that, I mean, unfortunately, most of the information I got from him was from his obituary from when he passed in 2010. But also looking around, it's clear that he had an effect on people. It seemed that he had a very personable attitude about him, and that just looking around online, I've seen a lot of offers of people who got to meet Chuck in his life and bought knives from him and talked with him, who are trying to resell them now in these sort of smaller community forums and stuff like that. So it's just this nice sort of a real human being is behind it.
He was a character, not just an artist.
Yes.
He was somebody who was approachable, and he was somebody who, when you bought a knife from him, you didn't just buy a knife, you bought a story.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're in the business of here. Yeah. And I would be remiss not to mention that one of these knives has as its grip the jawbone of a wolf.
Yes.
You can't get more Alaskan than that.
No, you certainly can't. And I mean, wonderful, just great conversation pieces. I think in general they're really wonderfully made, very strong. I mean, that's the thing to say too, is that talking about what makes a good knife, and that there is a huge market of a show knife, but it is to say that there are plenty of blades that really are made never to work, and you can't really say that about Chuck's. I mean, these are made to have a character about them and to function.
Every smart person should carry some kind of a fine cutting implement. Zeb, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Les.
All right. And as Zeb marches off to his latest outdoor journey, just a quick reminder that your next journey should lead you to our gallery in Thomaston for in-person previews of our North American Collection auction, presenting all the sweep and majesty of a continent. Previews begin Monday, May 11th and run through Thursday, May 14th, with the sale itself underway at 11 a.m. sharp on Friday, May 15th. We'll all be watching for you, so be sure to come by. And don't forget, if you can't bid in person, save 5% off your winning buyer's premiums by bidding by phone or absentee. Get the full story and look over our complete catalog at thomastonauction.com. Program is produced, written, and edited for you by yours truly, Elizabeth McLeod, who wishes you smooth sailing and happy bidding for Auction Waves. Auction Waves is an exclusive audio presentation of Thomaston Place Auction Galleries in Thomaston, Maine.